consumers prefer to buy and engage with a brand who has an authentic, easy to understand, sustainable purpose story. Full stop.
For too long, entrepreneurs and business owners have been told they have to choose between profit and purpose. If you're tired of burning out, done chasing someone else's version of success, and ready to grow with more purpose, prosperity, and peace of mind, you're in the right place. Because every business has the potential to do good and do well. I'm Chase Friedman, and this is In Pursuit of Purpose, where strategy meets soul.
Today, we're going to talk about the ROI of purpose, the belief and the proof that purpose isn't just a feel-good story, it is actually strategy, and it is the new measure of business performance in a very crowded marketplace. Few leaders have the data and the experience and conviction to back up these claims. So there's no one better to unpack this than Julie Davitz. She's the founder and CEO of Plus Media Solutions and one of the leading voices in impact investing and purpose-driven growth. So think about this. If the future of business is impact, how are you measuring it? And what is that actually worth to you and your bottom line? Julie has spent her entire career helping leaders answer that question by proving that doing good isn't just charity, it is smart business. This episode bridges belief and proof, showing that when purpose is done right, it's not just a cost center, it is a competitive advantage. Julie, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Always good to see you.
I've been looking forward to this date on the calendar because you are probably one of the foremost people I know that is, again, leading with purpose just in your life and your work, and literally the platform that you built at Plus Media, which is designed to literally help people sort of walk the talk, not just box check, but measure impact and measure purpose as a result of performance. So I want to get into that today, but shifting back, you've got an incredible career working with large financial institutions and large corporations, and then you shifted things and you decided to start your own venture and your own company. I want to go back to what was that inflection point for you, that light bulb moment that said, you know what, it's time for me to kind of chart my own path and my own course.
Yeah, thanks. It is an interesting journey, and I actually began in the impact space on the nonprofit side. So then moving from the nonprofit to the financial side, the for-profit side, really gave me a glimpse of both sides of the coin. Meaning that in impact, there's millions, if not trillions of dollars that go out on the nonprofit side and on the for-profit side, and I was lucky to have a hand in the guidance and deployment of some of those dollars and the strategy behind it. But what I saw on either side of that coin was a gap. And that is a lot of money being spent on messaging, awareness raising, driving people to have some kind of feeling or motivation about a cause, but then a severe lack of action around all of that and all of those dollars that went into this messaging. So that's really around 2016. I was still at working in Midtown Manhattan, but I became so frustrated with the lack of action that I thought we needed. And I thought there has to be a better way. There has to be a way to make it easy for people to act on that emotion that they feel. And guide them in a way that feels very authentic and relevant.
Amazing. Classic founder story. You saw a need, you saw a problem, you saw a gap in the marketplace, and you went and you solved it. And
a bit of insanity, but
that is like the flavor of the week here on this show, and entrepreneurship in general is a little bit of sort of bold, reckless abandon, but in this case, doing something because you knew there could be a better way forward. So what you're describing is there was a gap between sort of the feel good and the awareness and the inspiration behind a particular cause and the actual action and activation that was being taken, right? We talk a lot about, it's easy to sort of talk the talk and box check and make these kind of empty promises. But what if you can actually not just take that next step, but measure it? What has been previously the resistance you have seen from companies not taking that next step, right? Kind of resting on laurels around, we're going to generate awareness in these charitable campaigns, but either we don't know how to measure impact, we don't know what to measure. Where is that gap, and how are you helping transform that belief?
Yeah, I'll put it in context a bit because, again, when I was on both sides of that coin that I talked about, what I needed to do in my various roles, was do an impact report. And impact reports are too often vignettes of things that may have occurred during this particular campaign. But what I saw was most of my clients and I personally wanted more data to really understand how behavior change is being moved through particular efforts and campaigns. So to your point, I think that there are both content creators and brands and nonprofits and other that really do want to know, but they back away from that knowledge because, number one, they're afraid that maybe all of that money that they spent actually didn't do anything. And what I can say to that right off the bat is, out of the hundreds of campaigns and clients that we've worked with now, we've had one that has not hit their KPIs. And we know exactly why that happened. So full stop. Most of the time, what's happening is the messaging is going out and it's really inspiring people. And then what? And then the recipient of that message has nowhere to hang on to. So you've made all this effort to grab their attention and you've given them nothing to direct that attention to. The second, and you mentioned this, is they're not sure what to measure. That's exactly where we come in. We help that client understand what they should be messaging that aligns with their own goals and what can be measured and how do we do that. And then there's a third part of that too, though, that once all that data starts coming in, you need to really have someone who can analyze that data and parse it out and bring it to you in a way that you go, oh yeah, I get that. For example, we just finished a client campaign that we found through our data that the paid media did not do very well. And the other outreach that we had in the campaign excelled. So that was a really interesting insight that we pulled from all of those numbers coming in that can really help that client going forward.
And what was that other outreach that outperformed paid media?
It was everything from just, social posts to newsletters, to events. But the paid was not what really brought them huge engagement.
No surprise. Yeah. I think it sounds like sort of more organic content marketing, experiential marketing,
Right.
rather than your so-called, pay-per-click or performance
Right.
marketing, which again, we've seen across the board in any industry. Those are kind of diminishing returns. People are looking for something more meaningful than just being served an ad out of nowhere.
Exactly.
What you've just described, the journey of these companies, kind of reminds me of, it's kind of the entrepreneurial journey, right? Or in life, we ask ourselves, okay, what is my purpose? What am I meant to be doing in my life, right? And hopefully that translates into your work, the business you're starting, the company you're working for. But it can be very scary to be vulnerable and identify and call that out, what that is. And then even more of a barrier when you say, all right, well, I'm going to set goals for myself and measure against how I'm living up to my own expectations. So it's, in a way, it's companies are suffering from the same thing. It's maybe there's a desire to do good, right? There's a mission, there's a purpose, but to say it out loud that's great. That's one step. That's kind of speaking it into existence. But when you ask us to really measure against that promise, and what if we don't hit our goals, and are we really making good on it? I can see how some people might pull back from that. But now, armed with the data and the transparency and the insight, what you're describing is they are kind of seeing that self-fulfilling prophecy. This is working. And
oh my gosh, yes.
why wouldn't you want to do that if you were spending millions of dollars in some cases
Right.
for these efforts? Where's,
Right.
I mean,
right. And I would add to that for these companies, we can directly connect the dots to ROI, and not just return on investment, it's return on impact. So it's a twofer. And it is so clear that consumers prefer to buy and engage with a brand who has an authentic, easy to understand, sustainable purpose story. Full stop. So why wouldn't you do that? I mean, it is truly a competitive advantage.
this just reminds me why this is exactly why I wanted to have you on the show, because we're speaking the same language.
We
Julie.
are.
I love
Yes.
it. It's amazing. You're making my life easier, because again, I think this is why it's about, I want this show to be about shifting belief in what we thought we knew about how purpose is not just fluff, it's fuel, right?
Right.
You just said the title of this episode is going to be the ROI of purpose, because not just feeling good about the work you're doing, not just doing good, but doing well, right? As I always like to say, profit with purpose. You can have both. They are not mutually exclusive.
Not exclusionary at all. In fact, we argue that they are so synergistic.
Exactly.
And the more you can align those two, the more sustainable you as a company, as a creator, as an artist, the more successful you will be. And it is so exciting to see that proven out in numbers.
So let's unpack that for a second, because again, I want to speak to both the believers and the skeptics, right? What does that actually mean? The ROI of purpose, right? You said obviously return on investment, but return on impact. What are the KPIs, the numbers, the outcomes, the behaviors that you're seeing that are tangible proof that these efforts are working?
Right. First of all, I would say that every one of our client projects are different, because every client has a different goal and set of KPIs. So everything that we create is designed specifically to hit those goals and KPIs. But we measure against those goals, those KPIs for the client, but then we also measure against the benchmarks of that particular cause or theme or industry, so we can know where this client is coming in with their message. And then we layer on the measurement of the UN SDGs, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So putting all of that data together really can show, you get a very clear view of what your constituency, your audience is really resonating with. So is your consumer, do they really care about your water policy? Do they care about your gender policy? Do they care at all? Or are they more interested in knowing why your product is more expensive than the other because of the sustainability standards that you've put in place? So all of those things we are embedding into our consumer engagement and then measuring against. And we do that with different tools. But for the client who is hand-wringing about, gosh, should I do this impact or purpose messaging and engagement, all of the data shows that it is by far the most effective messaging. And you can prove that out through measurement, but if you don't, that is your call. But that messaging is going to put you in a very, very competitive place, in a very, very competitive market. So why would you overlook that?
Yeah, I mean, again, you've said that the data is compelling, right? And you've mentioned a little bit of it. Purpose-driven companies outperform their competitors by, over 400% over kind of a 10-year span. They command a higher pricing power in many cases, right? So margin and market share. They grow 3 times faster. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of the landscape? And sort of what you just described is sort of research against your consumers as well. What are they needing and seeking so that you can do more of as a company And it sounds like a lot of those things are emotionally driven, values driven. What are some of the key things that you think companies need to lean into now that are going to set them up for success in the next 5, 10, 15 years, as we are kind of seeing really truly, this is not a trend. This is a movement, a generational movement. What are companies needing to look at right now to help them prepare for success and growth? And in some cases, avoid disaster, loss, failure by not embracing it.
Right. I think there are several things. So not in any particular priority that I'm going to list these off, but we are going through a market shift right now, no question, both on the company side and on the consumer side. So we have to really recognize that we're at this inflection point. And it's similar to, when we switch from radio to TV, I think that's probably one of the most, the best analogies. That it used to be very generic. It used to be something that we were just hearing, and then all of a sudden we could see, and we got much more information that way. We're seeing that now in this purpose messaging space. Consumers, from the consumer side, we know that their attention span is very, very short. But what we know is that when you do have their attention, and I'll speak to the points of getting that attention. When you do have that attention, they want to interact. Consumers want to interact with their brand. They want to interact with their content. And they only want what they want at that moment. So at that point of sale. So on the other side, for the company has to understand that the consumer isn't really just looking for facts. The consumer wants to put it in context. So you have to tell the story, but the story has to be so concise and so clear and so relevant to where that consumer is at that given moment. So she's standing in the grocery aisle and she's trying to decide between one kind of yogurt and the other. One is more expensive. Why is that? She wants to know right then and there. Why is that brand of yogurt more expensive? Why does that affect me and my life? And that, we know, will move the needle towards the purchase. And then we track all of that. But what's being lost is, so what's happening in Europe right now, I think, which is super exciting, but they have a digital product passport. And this is going on every single product that's going out in Europe, even if it's manufactured from outside of Europe. The problem I see with the digital product passport is even you and I, who are steeped in, ESG and sustainability and all of this, I look at the digital product passport. I'm like, what? What do those numbers mean to me? And how is this influencing my decision on buying this over another? I think a lot of US brands are guilty of that as well. They slap these numbers on packaging, and nobody knows. No one's going to take the time to try and research and find out what these are about. So give the consumer things that she can really hang on to. Maybe it's a short video from the head of sustainability. Maybe it's a short video about a farmer. Maybe it's, what's happening in your watershed that is related to the water sustainability issues of this company. It takes time, it takes effort, but it absolutely amplifies that message. And it really is that market shift that where we're sitting right now.
You've called out, you touched on it a little bit, but I want to highlight the fact that you are leveraging storytelling as sort of the driver for these campaigns that you're running with your clients, right? And that can be in any form, short form, long form, documentary, right? You're leveraging storytelling as the conduit to generate inspiration or emotion or whatever that might be, and then measuring the steps that the customer is taking beyond that to kind of measure, okay, did this resonate? Was this effective? What are they choosing or doing next? Why is storytelling, it's kind of like a loaded question, and it's kind of almost why is storytelling the most powerful medium to help drive customer purchase, customer loyalty, brand loyalty. Why start with storytelling, and how is that differentiated from any other tool or tactic we can use?
Yeah. Well, if you think about the ads that we're fed all the time, whether it's on mainstream TV or on social, whatever, they're very generic. And 9 times out of 10, they're just not very exciting either. Storytelling is a very different messaging, a way to message. It's more human. And back in the day when I was doing fundraising, when you would ask someone to support a cause, you would tell a story. You would tell a story about that starving child. You would tell a story about that girl that needs help with education. That works. Storytelling is exactly the same, brand storytelling. What we see is the more human and authentic that story can be, even though it has to be very short and it has to be very relevant. But that's what really grabs the emotion. And we know that most purchases are emotion driven. So we have to start with that. And what I have been seeing over, the last 10 years is the growth in this kind of brand storytelling sector. But then the story stops. And you think, okay, I've seen great brand storytelling from everyone from John Deere to REI to Yeti, great companies. And then they stop. And I think, wow, can you imagine if you just could then act on all of those wonderful emotions that those stories brought up? I mean, that drives the company's ROI. So that really is, the new direction of leaning on story and leaning on that activation piece. And then, of course, the iterative measurement that helps you understand what storylines are really working.
Yeah, no, there's such a great crossover in some of the work that we do, and you as well, where we are coming across, whether it's brand films and brand storytellers or producers and filmmakers in general, you are spending time and money and resources and effort creating the thing, creating the story, right? The piece of content. And then what?
Right.
I find myself asking, and then what? What is your strategy for making sure people see this and get to enjoy it and experience it?
Right.
And a lot of times it's like, a glazed look, or we're going to, get, submitted for some awards and pat ourselves in the back. We're going to put it on YouTube, our own owned and operated. Okay, well, there's a start, but you can create the best, most immersive storytelling in the world. Unless you are reaching the right people in the right ways, it can still fall flat. And
Absolutely.
So part of this is not, as I always like to say to our filmmaker clients, the finished film is not the finish line. Yeah. So what I love about what you're doing is you're taking these beautiful storytelling, content. We buy an emotion first, right? We start with emotion. Okay, I'm inspired to act. But then we validate that decision with logic. That's when the logic kicks in. I need something to kind of affirm that emotional decision. What you're helping these people do is inspire this emotion and then immediately connect them, right?
Right.
Not tomorrow, not in a week, because that dies off.
Right.
With an opportunity to engage in a deeper and more meaningful way, whether it's an aligned nonprofit or initiative or learn more or contribute or donate, which is, again, that's the full funnel experience that you need. You can't have one without the other. Can you, I feel like I'm bearing the lead. Can you give us a sort of a tight case study of one of your favorite campaigns, sort of beginning to end, and what that sort of journey and user experience looks like?
Yeah, actually, we haven't formally written this up yet, but it's happening right now. We are live on NBC with a series called Devil in Disguise that is episodic. And so after every episode, the viewer is invited to engage with the content, and she gets our platform, our Impact Hub. This has been phenomenal because what it shows us is this is mainstream TV. This is actually, to say that it's a true crime series isn't incredible, isn't so exact. What's the word I'm looking for? But it is a story that focuses on gender violence and LGBTQ issues. And it's beautifully told. I mean, I've been blown away. So that emotional hook is there. So after each episode ends, the viewer can just tap or click or scan, depending on what platform she's on and what device she's using. And she gets her menu of more information about gender equality legislation, about LGBTQ issues, what is improved since the 1970s, and what we still need to work on. And then she gets a drop-down menus of what she can do both as a caregiver, as a teen, as a parent, as someone who wants to bring this to her community or get more involved in her community. And our engagement numbers have been through the roof. And you would think, well, maybe, gosh, this is about crime and maybe it's a little too dark, or maybe gender issues are not at the forefront of people's minds right now. That's not what our data shows. I mean, that people are very, very ready and willing and interested to engage and to learn more and to take action. That's been great. The other campaign that just ended was for MTV around Black maternal health. And MTV had a couple of goals, very, very simple. One, to get more people to watch the film. And two, was to elicit more stories from viewers about their own experiences around maternal health. And then we added in a couple of components around maternal health guides, et cetera, et cetera. We had so many poignant stories submitted through our platform that we call Express Yourself. And so it was a mother to mother kind of thing. So women all over the world could submit their stories about their experiences and what they would suggest and how to talk to a doctor and what they learned while they were going through postpartum, et cetera, et cetera. Really amazing. And then the maternal health guide also got a lot of engagement, and we increased viewership. And even lastly, I would say with the Netflix film Nonas, Netflix only cares about increasing viewership, and that's great. One community was really interested and is really interested in impact. So we were able to merge those two by encouraging people to have their own watch party for Nonas, which drove the viewership up. And then we had the impact campaign for one community that drove awareness around intergenerational connection through letter writing, through telling stories, through engaging with our Plus AI, the Plus Amplified Impact. So lots of different ways that people can prove their ROI.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like unanimously across the board. They're clearly seeing the numbers they're hoping and wanting to see from this. The question comes from, again, a little bit of, plain devil's advocate is, again, why these companies are doing it, right? Why they're investing in a campaign like this. And you described a little bit about it, right? Okay, great. Viewership and engagement and user-generated content. What are some of the other reasons that companies may or may not even be thinking of and considering on how this can benefit them, both ROI return on investment and ROI return on impact?
Yeah, I think a number of folks that we've talked to think that this is going to be really hard and really expensive. And from working with us, it's not hard and it's not expensive. So there's this misconception because in the past, impact campaigns and impact work have cost, easily over $100,000. I mean, that's what a lot of these groups have been charging. We're a SaaS platform, so we're way less. And that's phenomenal. The other is for the companies that decide they want to do this, it's baked into their culture. This is something that they just believe in from the get-go, and they're ready to do it, and they understand the importance of not just putting out the message, but extending it and measuring it. And then lastly, I would say it's It's when companies look for a differentiator. Those are the companies that realize, wow, if we get this right, we know there's payback here, a really positive payback. So I think that's kind of the profile of what we're seeing out there.
I think you hit on it. I'm glad you brought this up in terms of differentiation, market differentiation, right, amongst your competitors. I am a firm believer, and I kind of built a bit of a framework that I'm working on with my clients called purpose positioning, right? How your purpose helps position you strategically in a crowded marketplace, right? Forget, the 4 Ps and price and product and features. Like,
Yep.
Great. That's a generation ago. Far too many products or competitors or consumers to kind of try to align on that race to the bottom sort of mentality when you're differentiating in the marketplace. But purpose as a positioning tool and mechanism and power, right? When you can especially couple it with those brand values and that mission, right? Connecting back to the emotion with the consumer.
Absolutely.
That's a bit of a win-win, right? So we're not only doing this to hopefully do some good in the world, right?
Yeah.
That should be the baseline. But we know it's going to make us a stronger, more resilient, more differentiated company and engage our consumers in hopefully a deeper, more meaningful way than just they watched it, they transacted, and then they're off going about their lives. They're spending more time with us. Brand trust, brand equity, brand loyalty, brand ambassadorship. Let me reframe this for a moment because we're talking about big companies. What would you say, what advice would you give to the smaller entrepreneur, right? The SMB, the solopreneur, a startup,
Yep.
doesn't have a big team. Maybe it's one person, right? Doesn't have a lot of the means or resources or funds to invest in this, even though it's relatively approachable. How can they get started, right? If there's a desire to say, I want to lead with purpose and I want to walk the talk, what advice would you give them to kind of turn their purpose into positioning power?
Yeah, I've seen some great, CEOs, whether they're solo entrepreneurs or with SMBs, as you say. If it's really a priority to them, then it needs to be a priority that you continue throughout the growth of your company. That you created this company, and yes, we're capitalists. We want to make money on this. This is great, and we pledge to have purpose behind us the entire way. So I think it's almost a mantra in whatever project you happen to be doing, whatever client you happen to be working with, whatever messaging you're putting out, thinking about how is purpose in there some way? Mm-hmm. How are we just planting these seeds? So as we grow, people will always know that we're a purpose-driven company. It's not something that we're going to slap on, once we, hit 10 million in revenue or whatever the case may be, but it's baked in from the very beginning. And I think that's where you see a tremendous, it's almost palpable, the feeling of authenticity that comes with that. It's so genuine, and that serves the business so well. Even if they don't have big budgets to do marketing yet, whatever they can do still has that, that glimmer of purpose in there, and it shows, and that alone is a differentiator.
Amazing. So it's not too high of a bar, whatever that means for you and your company, whether it's supporting your local community, whether it's, driving, food bank donations, whether it's partnering with a nonprofit, right? Which I think is some underutilized sort of mechanism and a form of collaboration, more for a nonprofit. They think that they exist in different worlds and they have so much in common.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of these for-profit companies set these lofty goals and expectations, like they have to be this thought leader on this particular issue. And yet you have a nonprofit right here who is boots on the ground, who has an incredible community that they probably need something from you, whether it's, funding or strategy or guidance, whatever it might be. And in turn, you can directly tap into their expertise and do a greater good through their channels, right? You don't have to carry that all on your own shoulders.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And oftentimes when people think about that public-private partnership, that they're thinking, at top tier, some Fortune 500 company or whatever. But you know what? There are so many great companies that we don't even know exist that are in towns all over the US, all over the world for that matter. And so why not use what's in your backyard and make those public-private partnerships much stronger by banding together? You've got the same group of demographics. Wow, it's just a built-in, really a gem. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, you'll do more good. You'll be able to reach more people with more impact. And again, imagine when you do partner with this group and community that follows this nonprofit, you're reaching potentially new customers, right? And ambassadors for your brand. So doing good, doing well. All right. So as we're wrapping up, I like to kind of end with a few like rapid fire quick questions. A thought, a line, a word, if you want, in response to some of these, right? Key takeaways.
Okay.
What is one lie that founders or business owners need to stop believing about purpose and impact?
That it's going to come back and bite them.
Ooh, interesting. Okay. I like that. What is one book or resource you wish every founder or leader would read on this topic?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard one because there are so many, and some of those authors are my friends. So it would be hard to pick one out. There are a lot of really good ones.
All right. You could send them to me. I'll put them in the show notes when we post the episode. Okay. Julie's top 5.
There you go.
And I'll probably have to read most of them myself because I'm sure you're like an even deeper resource. What is one company or person that you admire today for how they are leading with purpose, measurement, proof in what they are doing?
Gosh, there are different segments of industries, right? So one is a production company based in LA called Littleton Road. And this is an example of how purpose has been built in from the very beginning. They started their company, a brother and sister, and then spouse. And immediately they started a nonprofit arm of their production company. And everything they do is based around purpose. It's really quite remarkable. They walk the walk. I think that's amazing. There are today, I think we can see some really good brands and products out there that are doing great work. Everything from, one of my favorite examples is Billie Eilish. I think that she's a great example of an artist, a mainstream artist that is willing to stand up on stage and be an advocate for something that she believes in, because artists have this megaphone today, and this could be so useful. It doesn't have to be political, but wow, what we like to see is when artists will really pay attention, and when they travel to different areas, that they can partner with those nonprofits in that area, and just, it's a rising tide lift all boats situation. Mm-hmm. They've got the megaphone. Let's use it to help. And then lastly, I would say, in terms of a consumer product, I think Tony's Chocolonely has done amazing work. I love what they do. I'm a huge fan, not only of their product, but what they do. And they are people, these are all 3 examples in different industry sectors who are doing things right, who see the market shift, frankly. Yeah. I mean, I know that all of these people are doing it because they believe in it, but it's also because this is good business. It's very much like why the NFL chose Bad Bunny for the halftime show, right? Sure. I mean, Bad Bunny is popular, and NFL is all about business. And they made a good, sustainable choice on diversity and meeting the market. And I say, good for them.
Not always easy to make that call, but in the end, I think they will ultimately be the winners of this. And even though there is pushback and disagreement for it, you saw that with Nike way back when,
Right.
partnering with Colin Kaepernick.
Right.
At the time, everyone called him crazy. What are you doing? And it ended up absolutely giving them a resurgence in terms of market share and engagement and margin. So what you said earlier, be wary of the knee-jerk reaction once you make a bold move. There might be a little bit of a course correction immediately, but if you stay the course, it will absolutely pay dividends.
Yeah.
All right. Last question. What do you believe is your purpose? What is Julie's purpose?
I've always felt that my purpose is connecting. And whether that's connecting dollars to the right nonprofit or the right social entrepreneur, or whether it's connecting people to solutions that I know exist. I just think connecting that's my jam. That's why I'm here.
Amen. You're doing it every day. Thank you so very much for being here, for sharing your wisdom with us. I definitely we'll get links to your platform plus media, some resources, some case studies if you want to share them. We'll put them in the show notes. So for anyone listening that wants to learn more, dive deeper, get in touch with Julie, we'll put those links out there. But hopefully this was a little bit of an inspiration, a motivation to take that next step beyond just the promise of purpose.
Let go of your fear. Just do it.
There you go. Thank you, Julie.
Thanks so much, Chase.
I appreciate you tuning in today. I hope this brought you a bit of confidence, clarity, and conviction on your business journey. If something here resonated, do me a favor, leave a quick review or share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. It goes a long way in helping more people find the show and start their own journey. And as always, you'll find all the resources and ways to connect with me in the show notes. Now, go take that next step in building the business you've been dreaming of. Wishing you continued purpose, prosperity, and peace of mind.